Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Soul and Screen. In this particular video, we are going to be doing a review on Tyler Perry's Zatima, season number 2, episode number 1, titled Basic Instinct. Let's get into it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if there are any in the subscribers, we finally made it to season 2 of Zatima. And let me say that while I absolutely enjoyed season number 1 of Zatima, I love season 2. I love all the seasons. I know there were many people who had issues with them, but I am not one. So anyway, let's just get into it. Last season, it ended on basically Fatima getting the test results emailed to her of the DNA test about Zach's possible baby by the stripper, remember? And so anyway, it ends on that, and it picks up in season 2 where once again Zach and Fatima are having a nice sexual encounter in the shower. But baby, this is absolutely not the blue light special shower scene that we saw them in season 2 when they first got together on Sisters. This is totally different. This is hilarious. It opens where Zach has Fatima up against the shower wall, and she is not looking like she's, enjoying things right now. And so they finally, he finishes and he's telling her, like, don't move. And he puts her down, and, she's just like, oh my goodness. Like, and he's like, she's like, Zach, we got to talk. And he's like, what are you talking about? And she was like, yes, we got to talk. And he was like, come on, like, Fatima, like, not right now, babe. Like, we just had good morning sex. And she's like, I know. She was like, that. And so she goes, like, Zach, you had like 103 temperature last week and you was still trying to get some. And he was like, I didn't do that for me. I did that for you. And she was like, and that's why I'm saying we need to talk. And he was like, Fatima, like, what's going on? He was like, no, we're not going to do that. He was like, if we going to talk, let's talk about, you beating up the tenant and snitching on Nate. And she was like, I ain't ready to talk about that. And he was like, you see, every time I want to talk about something, you want time to process it and think it through and everything. But whenever you want time to talk about something, you want to do it right here and right now. And so she was like, well, ain't you supposed to take time to process things? And he was like, but you don't never want to talk about what I want to talk about. And so they kind of go back and forth about that. And she's like, you know what, fine, Zach, like, we'll talk about it later. And he was like, okay, talk about Deja. And so she looks and like, I said I was processing. And he was like, see, this is what I'm talking about. Like, why are you mad? And she was like, I'm not mad. And he was like, what's wrong with the sex, Fatima? And so she was like, nothing's wrong with it. And he was like, well, yes, it is. And she was like, no, Zach, it's not. I really love it. She was like, it's just too much. And he was like, too much. And he was like, well, I'm a man. And she was like, and I'm a woman. And he was like, what? And she was like, you know what? You're not hearing me. And he was like, I am. And so she was like, you know what, Zach? I gotta get ready for work. Like, so she continues, taking a shower. She's lathering up this whole time that they're talking. And so she's like, you know what, Zach, I gotta, get dressed and stuff. So she's like, or I'm gonna be late. So she pushes him out the shower and he's like, no, Fatima, hold on. And so she literally pushes him out and he falls and she's like, sorry. And so that was pretty much it for that. So the episode picks up where they are going downstairs. They're walking downstairs. They are completely dressed for work at this point. And Fatima is just like, what, Zach is like behind Fatima. He's like, this is crazy. And she's like, whatever. And he was like, Fatima, are you serious? And she was like, yeah. And he was like, seriously? And she was like, Zach, let me ask you just a little something. And like, have you ever had this problem before? And he looked at her. He's like, first of all, I ain't got no problem. She was like, okay, well, then have any other of the women that you've been with ever said that you wanted it too much? And he was like, seriously? And she was like, yes, Zach, like, I'm a woman. This is a lot. And he was like, I'm a man. Like, what you want me to do? Like, and so she goes, she just started bringing up different stuff. Like, she was like, at one point, you talked to me the other week and you was like, you want to lay down and you want to spend some time and cuddle. And so she was like, I was pumped about that. My baby want to cuddle, big spoon, little spoon. And he was like, yeah, I remember that. And she was like, but all you wanted was sex. And he was like, well, nah, it didn't start off like that. Like, I didn't just want sex. I did want to. He was like, but like, how much big spoon, little spoon can you expect me to do? And so she was like, listen, I'm just saying, babe. She was like, forget it. She was like, I'm basically just saying, like, maybe you need to talk to your boys. And he was like, you want me to talk to my boys? And she was like, wait, hold on, pause. No, actually, I don't. She was like, I would rather you, like, maybe you should talk to your doctor or something. And he was like, seriously, you think I got a problem? She was like, babe, I just don't think this is right. He was like, so you think I got some kind of medical problem because I look at you, I'm attracted to you, and I want to have sex with you? And she was like, no, babe, I'm saying it because I think you want it too dang much. And so she was like, you know what, Zach, I gotta go. And he was like, well, no, I gotta go too. And she was like, no. He's like, no, I gotta go to the office. And so they both stand up, and, he's like, but when we get back, we're gonna finish talking about this. And she's like, that's fine. And so he goes, so she goes, bye, Zach. So she gives him a kiss, and she goes, dang, you see what I'm saying? Like, he was like, what? She was like, you hard. This is what I'm saying. And he was like, you haven't even seen yourself in these pants. And so she was like, you know what, Zach, I cannot with you. So she walks out the door, and he's following her. When they get outside, they literally see Deja sitting in the back of a ambulance. And so Fatima is looking, and she's like, what's this chick up to now? So she walks over, and Zach is like, no, Fatima. And so she just walks over, and she was like, what is this? And so when they get to the ambulance, Deja goes, hey, Zach. And Fatima was like, hey, Zach. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're not going to talk to me, but you're going to talk to my man? And so they was like, what's going on? And she was to Deja, and Deja was like, don't act like you don't know what's going on, Fatima. Like, and she was like, what? She was like, what you did. You drugged me and beat me, pulled me out of your hot tub. And so she's talking about when she pulled her out of the hot tub and beat her up, and hit her. And she was like, yeah, well, you better be lucky that's all I did. And so Deja is like, did you hear that, Mr. Ambulance Man? And so Fatima was like, yeah, I hope he did. And so Zach is like telling Fatima, like, can you get in the car? And Fatima's looking at him, and she was like, Zach, I don't want you out here talking to her. And he was like, Fatima, I won't be. And she was like, go in the house. And he was like, Fatima, I will. And she was like, I'm not playing with you, Zach. I don't want you out here talking to her. And so she looks at him because, she had just told him in the house, like, you hard. And so she was like, I don't want you out here talking to her looking like, and so she looks down at him, and she's like, yeah, And he was like, I won't be. And so she goes, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and go because I don't want to have to whoop her tail no more. So she gets in the car, and Deja was like, yeah, she ain't going to do nothing or something like that. And Fatima looked at her and was like, let me go before I do something again. And so she gets in the car, and she tells Zach, I said, get in the house. And he was like, have a good day. I love you. And so Fatima pulls off. But when she pulls off, she kind of skirts off and scrapes the bottom of the car. And he was like, dang, I just got that car. And so he walks over to talk to Deja, and, Deja's like, dang, she possessive. And he goes, yeah, she is. And he was like, Deja, like, real talk, so you need to chill. And she was like, no, Zach, like, for real, she hurt me. You saw what she did. And so Zach was like, I didn't see nothing. And so he was like, but real talk, like, you're going to have to chill with everything. And she was like, well, Zach, like, I'm going to need some help and stuff. Like, you're not even going to help me. And he was like, what are you talking about? And she was like, I'm going to need to go to the doctor. And so let me put a pin here. Like, why do you feel like, this is what I'm saying. Like, why do you feel like that? First of all, he's supposed to take you to your doctor's appointments, because what he told her was like, just call the ambulance back. She was like, no, I'm gonna have doctor's appointments and I can't keep calling them. It's expensive. And he was like, basically, I don't know what to tell you. So he gets in his car and he leaves. But I don't know why Deja was assuming that, this man that she just met, she really just moved into his house as a tenant, is supposedly, just supposed to do all these things for him. And, just because she might be cute and she coming on to him. So anyway, Zach leaves and he pulls off, and Fatima comes creeping around the corner in her car, like slowly, just real creep style, like I promise you. And so Deja kind of sees it out, I guess, the Fatima's car at the corner of her eye. So she looks and she kind of like freezes a little bit, realizing that like Fatima ain't playing with her, but she had already told her, I ain't playing with you. Like, she literally told her in season 1, like, don't test me again. Like, so anyway, the episode picks up where Zach gets to work and he's walking in, but he's walking into his office like super quiet. Like he's literally sneaking in because guess what? He don't want to talk to Bryce because remember in the last season, before the season ended, Bryce and Angela wanted to come over and have a conversation with Fatima and Zach about what happened, but Zach and Fatima ended up getting the test results. So I'm pretty sure that didn't happen. So anyway, so Bryce is like listening for Zach. So he gets up and he's like, hey, Zach. And so Zach's like, hey, he's like, so, and he's just kind of small talking him. He was like, so, I closed the deal on something, so Zach was like, cool. And he was like, so I know me and Angela was supposed to come over to dinner last night and talk to you guys, but, you guys canceled. Was that because? And so Zach was like, it wasn't because of nothing. We just got some other stuff going on. And so Bryce is like, oh, okay. And so he goes, well, Zach, I really want to talk to you about last night. And so, I'm sorry and all this kind of stuff. And just talking about, him attempting to kiss Zach. And so Zach was like, I don't really want to talk about this. And he was like, well, I really want to talk about it. And Zach was like, I don't want to talk about it. And so he goes, so like Bryce is like pushing the conversation, right? He's like really trying to force Zach to have this conversation. And so Zach was like, I don't really want to. So he gets ready to go in his office. And then he goes, you know what? No, Bryce, yeah, you foul. Like you out of line. He was like, you came way incorrect. And so he's just telling him, this whole time you've been kicking it and everything. And you've been thinking this whole time, been thinking about me like this, because Bryce had told him, after we finish like this deal or so, if you want to just part ways and dissolve the business, and go your separate ways, basically go our separate ways, basically, because of what he did, it was okay. And so Zach told him, yeah, I think that's a good idea. So right before, Bryce walks into his office, that's when Zach kind of pulls him back and was like, you foul for this. Like, you shouldn't have came at me like this. Like, he was like, first of all, like, how you been, we've been kicking it this whole time and you've been looking at me like that. And he was like, no, he was like, you should have said something. And Bryce was like, well, Zach, I couldn't have told you because, like, how would you have reacted? And so Zach was like, man, like, I ain't no kid. Like, we grown. Like, you can do, have a relationship, whatever, who you want. Like, it ain't about that. But I told you that I wasn't into dudes and then you gonna try to kiss me? Like, you just basically you out of line. And so he was like, so Bryce is still just trying to explain himself and apologize. And so Zach is like, you know what? I'm good. Like, just you go to your room. I'm gonna go to my room. And then they part ways. The episode picks up where Fatima is now at work and Angela is in her office sitting down, and Fatima kind of just starts the conversation and she's like, so, hey, so basically Fatima was just like, so you just not gonna talk to Bryce no more? Because remember, she had told her, she was trying to encourage her to talk to Bryce about the whole situation and get the information from him that night when she called Fatima to try to go over there. So Fatima was like, so you just done with him? And so she was like, yeah, I'm done. I just kind of told him I was busy and I'll see him when I see him. And so Fatima was like, so you just done? And she was like, yeah. She was like, I mean, we wasn't talking that long. She was like, Fatima was like, yeah, but you like really liked him. And she was like, I know, but I can't do nothing with no dude who likes some D. You know what I'm saying? She was like, that's what I want. Basically saying she want a straight man, right? And she don't want nobody who is into extracurriculars. She want a straight man, only somebody who's into women only. And so, Fatima was like, yeah, I mean, I guess you're right. And so Fatima was like, well, so anyway, with that being said, well, I'm sorry, but do we need to go out? And so, Angela's like, nope, we don't need to go do nothing. And so she goes, all right. And she goes, anyway. So this is Angela telling Fatima, so what's going on with you and Zach? And so Fatima, takes this deep breath and sighs and just like, girl, besides the baby being his, and, Angela's like, dang, really? She was like, Fatima, you sure you want to deal with all this? Because, just kind of the drama of the baby mama stuff, right? As a friend, let me put a pin here, because there's a lot of people, of course, so I don't believe any of the Karen fans. Well, I ain't gonna say that because I do think some of the Karen fans do watch Zatima, because periodically you can hear them referencing stuff on Zatima when they're talking about sisters and stuff like that. So I would say I think some of them do. But with that being said, they always try to bring up that that Fatima like chose to be in this drama with Zach and everything. And once again, Fatima chose to be with the man that she's in love with and the man that is in love with her. But the drama, there is absolutely no way that a woman thinks or knows that drama is going to happen with this. She's hoping, right, that this will be two, adult people having a conversation, agreeing to co-parent in this situation with Heather, because y'all was never a couple. You screwed him and you got caught up, and now you want some child support, which you are due since it is his baby, but not thinking that it's going to be drama. With the Karen thing, you guys were broken up. So once again, if you come in and saying that you pregnant now, as long as you can prove that the baby is his, like, again, these are co-parenting situations where she's just like, as long as you come correct, it shouldn't be no problem. She didn't know that these people were going to bring drama to the situation and stuff like that. But anyway, just to go back to Angela asking Fatima, like, is you sure? So she was like, yeah. And she was like, but girl, like, that ain't even really the biggest thing. And so, Angela, like, what you mean? And she was like, girl, she was like, sex, like Zach, he wants sex like all the time. And so, Angela was like, okay, Fatima, like, let's not act like you don't, you like sex too. And she was like, no, like, I do like sex. And I like it with him, in all honesty. And she was like, girl, she was like, especially when he looked into my eyes right before he about to get his. And she was like, it is just so sexy. And she's like, girl, he just be hitting spots I ain't never hit, I ain't never even knew was there, and just really kind of just saying the kind of, sex that they have. And so she just boasted on it. She's like, girl, I get mine a couple of times before he even get his. It is like absolutely the best. And like it was, you would think she was like, she's describing it, eyes dang near rolling in the back of her head while she talking about it to Angela. Angela like, dang. And so she was like, well, kind of what's the problem? She was just like, it's just too much. So she's basically telling Angela the same conversation. She's just like, it's a lot. He just wanted all the time. And so Angela's like, well, like, how many times you talking? And so Fatima was like 4. She was like, oh. And she was like, and then it was 6 the other day. And Angela was like, ooh. And so, she kind of closes her legs. And Fatima was like, exactly. Like, that's the process. That's what I'm talking about. She was like, girl, he go 45 minutes. And then 20 minutes later, he ready to go again. And it's just, And so Angela basically was like, wow. She was like, so what you going to do? Because you need to try to reel that in. Because, maybe, basically saying maybe that's one of the reasons why he was always cheating on old girl and having all these extra women is because that's his sexual appetite. And so Fatima was like, girl, don't play with me like that. Like, I will, I will kill him if I have to. Like, don't play. And so she was like, I bet, she was like, but you're going to have to figure out a way to get that and so get that together. And Fatima was like, I know, I just don't know what else to do. She goes, because all I know is I don't know how much more Roxy can take. And Angela's like, who is Roxy? And so she points to her, her area, and she's like, girl, her. And so Angela's like, why you call her Roxy? That sound all hard. And Fatima was like, girl, because she rocks it. Like, do not get it twisted. And so Angela was like, okay. So anyway, Fatima's like, yeah, I got to work on that. Fast forward into the episode a little bit more. You get to Zach. He is now at the barbershop, Tony's barbershop, getting his haircut. And when he's sitting in the chair getting his haircut, and Nate walks in, and the barber who's cutting Zach's hair, because Nate walks in, he's like, hey. And so his name is Mr. Tyrone, the barber who's cutting Zach's hair. And he was like, hey, don't be haying me. You got my money. And so Nate was like, dang, like, you can't say hi. He was like, don't be hiring me. Like, you've been on me for a couple of weeks. So Nate started getting ready to pay Mr. Tyrone. And Zach turns around and he grabs his money. He was like, dude, you owe me some money too. And so anyway, he sits down. And Nate sits down, and so he gonna tell Zach, like, you can't speak. And so Mr. Tyrone jumps in. He was like, nah, he can't speak. You got this chick all over his house in his hot tub. And so, Nate mad. He like, you told him, like, what you telling him our business for? And so he was like, he ain't got to tell me. The girl out telling everybody all the business. And so he was like, he was like, whatever. Me and him been doing all this for a while. Like, and so Mr. Tyrone kind of comes back at Zach, and he was like, yeah, and while he need to do that to get that together, you need to get Fatima together, basically, because he was like, because her holding out on you. And so then that gives Nate some ammunition. So he's like, oh, dang, she already holding out. And so Zach is like, nah, she not. And so Tony in the back, he's like, dude, y'all loud. So he come in from out of the back and he's like, I heard everything that y'all was just talking about. And so he come in and he asked Nate, like, did you apologize to Zach? And so Nate was like, apologize for what? And he was like, nah, like, he was like, you know why? And Zach was like, Tony, I don't need no apology from him. And so Nate was like, dude, we done been through way more than this and way deeper than that. Like basically saying he don't owe Zach no apology because this is kind of what they have always done. And so Tony is like really trying to talk him into apologizing and try to show Nate where he messed up. And so Zach stands up. He was like, I'm good, Mr. Tyrone, you done. So he stands up and he gets ready to leave. When he gets ready to leave, he was like, let me get back to the office. Jeremiah, remember his brother from season 1, walks in the door and he was like, look at you talking about, I got to get to the office. And so Zach, he's just shaking his head kind of like, well, hey, Jeremiah. He was like, what's up, little brother? And so he comes in and he's like, mama want to see you. And so Zach was like, what you mean mama want to see me? Why she want to see me? And so Jeremiah was like, what you mean why she want to see you? You her son, like, you don't think mama want to see you? And he was like, I'm just saying she ain't been wanting to see me this whole time. So all of a sudden, she want to see me. Remember, they just found out that Zach bought this house or had this house, and then Jeremiah just went over there and borrowed. Well, technically didn't borrow because it ain't like he gonna give it back. And asked Zach to give him $10,000. So basically, Zach know that his mama only really contacting him because he wants some money. So they get into this conversation. And he was like, "Go see mama." So Zach was like, "I said I'll go see her, man." And so he was like, "Just go see her." He's like, "I said all right." So before he gets ready to walk out the door, the phone rings and it's Jeremiah answers his phone. He was like, "Hey, Mom." And so he was like, "I got Zach right here." And so Zach was like, "Oh, you could tell he don't want to talk to her." And he was like, "Hey, Mom, hello," So he's like, "It's Zach. It's Zach." And he's like, keeps having to repeat to her who he is. And so, so he was like, "Here, just take your phone." And so Jeremiah was like I said, just, go see mama. And so you could tell that he kind of was just trying to do the big brother thing, because he was like trying to punk Zach, like, dude, take the effing phone, because Zach didn't want to speak to his mom. And so Zach did it and anything like that. But anyway, Zach's like, after he hangs up, he's basically done. So episode picks up where Fatima and Angela are in the parking garage walking to their cars after work, and they just talking about how long of a day it was for Fatima. And Fatima notices that she has a flat, and so she's like, "Dude, I got a flat." And so Angela was like, "Did somebody, slash your tire?" And so Fatima looked at it. She was like, "Well, nah." She was like, "I could see the nail in it." She was like, "Plus, wouldn't nobody do that but your friend Belinda." And so Angela's like, she wouldn't do that. And so Fatima's like, yeah, okay. And so she goes, or Hayden. And so she goes to the, puts her purse in the car, and then she goes to get the spare and the jack out. And so Angela's like, "Girl, what you doing?" And she was like, "I'm about to change the tire." And she was like, "You about to change the tire? Don't you think you should call Zach for that?" And she was like, "Nah, he at work. I got it. I could do it." And so, she goes, Fatima. And so Fatima was like, "What?" And she was like, "You remember what Ian used to say, right?" And so she was like, "Seriously, you gonna bring up Ian? Like, we gonna talk about this?" And so she was like, "I'm just saying." She was like, "Fine, what did he used to say?" She was like, "Fatima, like, you're real independent and everything, but Ian, he said that you didn't need him. And the way I'm looking at it basically is you don't need Zach either if he can't come and do this." And so Fatima turns around and she was like, "We about to do this?" And so she was just like, "I'm saying, like, don't you deserve a man who will take out the trash for you and come and change your tires and stuff?" And so she was like, "I'm not saying that he can't do that. I'm just saying that I don't need him to do that." She was like, "Because what if I need him and one day I need him and he's not there?" Basically is what she said. And so Angela, was just kind of telling her, like, what are you talking about? Because she goes, "Well, if it's going to be tick for tack, in other words, if he only going to take out the trash and come change my tire just because he expects me or to cook and clean and all that kind of stuff, then that's not an even trade to me." And so Angela was like, "But Fatima," she goes, "I know I really like to cook and clean and all that anyway, but I'm just saying it's because I want to, not because I have to," kind of a thing. And so she was like, "I just kind of learned to keep my expectations down, and and it's been working for me and Zach." And let me just put a pin here and say, like, this is when Fatima's insecurities about certain about their relationship did try to surface. You know what I'm saying? Like, Zach pretty much, like, she's been coming across as this real strong type of woman, which, don't get me wrong, she is. It's just in these moments, like, of seriously him, coming to fix your tire. Like, that's what dudes want to do, right? Like, they don't want their woman out there changing a tire and things like that. But if you would listen to the further in the conversation, the real insecurity was that when she needs him, he won't be there. It wasn't necessarily about the tire. And so, even though I'm not sure why in this moment, why she thought he wouldn't show up with the tire, I guess maybe because they had the argument about sex, you know what I'm saying? But anyway, so Angela was like, you know what, I guess if that's what you're going to do it. So Fatima was like, that's fine, I'll change it. And she was like, can you hand me Angela was like, I ain't handing you nothing. Like, girl, bye. And so she was like, fine. So they're talking, they finishing up their conversation, and a construction worker comes through, and he happens to have been working on in their office building. And he's like, hey, I can help y'all with that if you want. And so Fatima stands up and she's like, no, I got it. And he was like, no, really, I don't mind. I got tools over here. Fatima was like, that's cool. And so he was like, and so Angela was like, I'm Angela, and he goes, you're Angela and you Fatima. And they go, how you know that? And they was like, yeah, how you know that? And so he was like, I'm, working upstairs and, doing all the construction. They were like, oh, okay, so you the dude who making all the noise. And he was like, basically, yeah. So he tells Fatima, honestly, it don't look like you're going to be able to fix that. It looked like you're going to need a whole new tire. And so he just kind of telling her some stuff that she didn't know. Like, she know how to change a tire, but obviously she didn't know that she was going to need another tire because of where the nail was in it and stuff like that. And so he goes, so I can fix it and then give you a ride home. And so she was like, no, I'll go ahead and call my fiance. And he was like, well, no, I'm telling you, I can get you a new tire it'll be fine. And she was like, well, I don't know you. I'm not leaving you, here my keys with you and stuff. And he was like, nah, you ain't got to leave your keys. He was like, there's no lock on the tire, so, just go ahead, leave it. I'll get it hooked up for you. And she was like, okay. After, kind of some conversation, she was like, all right, I guess I'll do it. And he was like, trust me, it'll be fine. And so he goes, can I give y'all a ride home? And so Angela was like, yeah. And so Fatima was like, no, because you got a car. So anyway, they leave, and it's Fatima walking into the house, and Zach is walking from the kitchen into the living room. He sees her, and they both lighten up. Like, he's like, hey, and she's like, hey, so they both cheesing, and Fatima walks over to the chair. She puts her, her purse down and gives him a hug and a kiss, and she sits down, and he's like, what you doing? And she was like, what you mean? He was like, come on. And she was like, wait a minute, babe, where we going? And he was like, you know where we going? And she was like, Zach, like, come on. And he was like, babe, Fatima. She was like, no, babe, like, real talk. So she pulls him down, and she was like, he was like, what? And so, again, having the sex conversation, like, this is just a lot. She had just told him that she need a break. You know what I'm saying? And so he goes like, Fatima, what's going on? She goes, listen, Zach, I was thinking about some stuff. She was like, and if this is how it's going to be, like, I think I've come up with a solution. And he was like, okay. And she was like, Zach, like, have you ever had a side chick? And he looks, and he was like, what? And she was like, yeah, I want you to have a side chick. And that was pretty much the end of the first episode, because it closes with him like, just like what the heck is going on? Because this is Fatima. Remember, like, this is the chick who, she ain't playing games with him. So it's like, completely off, topic for him that she even brought this up. So it ends then. So I'll stop here for the review and pick up in the next episode, which is episode 2. But let's get into the conversations below. So yes, let's talk about it. So what do you think about, like I said, the conversation between, Fatima and Angela, how she was telling, Angela that basically she was showing her real insecurity, which wasn't necessarily the relationship as far as Zach not, loving her, or it didn't even sound like she believes that he would cheat on her. It's always something there, but it was more that she would want him, need him, and he wasn't going to be there for one reason or the other. You know what I'm saying? Where the Karen fans tried to make it seem like, since Fatima's insecurity were about Zach going back to Karen, which originally it was like early in the relationship, season 3. But once, they got to season 4 and, he really solidified things. And even in season 3, that was not Fatima's insecurity any longer. So what do you guys think? That's what I think. Also, what do you think about Zach? So, Zach is always kind of telling Fatima that, you don't never want to talk about nothing when I want to talk about it. You always want to talk, about what you want to versus me. But here's the thing, Zach do the same thing. He literally did it with her as well, because remember, he don't want to talk about the sex thing. He actually wants to talk about Deja and Nate, which don't have anything to do with our relationship, period, point blank. She shouldn't have brought old boy should not have brought Deja over to our house. So it ain't really nothing to talk about that. I won't hit her no more. Got you. You know what I'm saying? That's pretty much the end of that conversation. But more so, her relationship with his best friend, I can see how they would probably want to talk about that. But they talk, Fatima talking about some stuff that actually really can affect their relationship, because obviously Zach been, it's kind of like an unsaid thing that they for sure most likely having sex every night, right? But now it's sounding like they having sex multiple times a day, three to 6 times a day, and it's just starting to wear on her. So let's talk about that. What do you think was a more important conversation, even though both needed to be discussed? But again, Zach seems to do that as well, and he tends to always throw that in Fatima's face, but he does it as well. He did it with Bryce at the job. Bryce wanted to talk about it right then and there. He was like, I don't want to. I want to, that kind of thing. So Zach does it as well. The other thing that I wanted to touch was, what was it? I think it was... no, I think that was it pretty much. Just kind of how they're all interacting kind of this season starting off. Zach and Jeremiah's relationship. You can tell that Jeremiah is like trying to play the puffed up brother role, and you know what I'm saying? But Zach is a grown man, but you can still see how he shrunk. If you watch the episode, as soon as he came in, it was like he turned into this kid again, where this older brother is telling him what to do and call his mom, even though Zach knows that his relationship with his mom, even though we don't see it yet, but obviously you can tell it's something up with his mom and his brother, that he don't want that, but he's feeling like he has to go into that because of who they are. So anyway, that's just something else. But let me know what you thought about the episode. And as we get into season 2, I look forward to reading the comments. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you down in the comments. Bye.